The Atlantic Ocean, 1723. A merchant vessel lists in choppy waters, its deck slick with blood. Captain Elias Blackwood stands like a giant among the fallen, his weathered face revealing no notion, as his crew pillages what remains. Below deck, amidst cargo and corpses, his eyes fix upon something unexpected, a woman in chains. Unlike the trembling sailors who begged for mercy, she meets his gaze with defiance. Her body bears the marks of cruelty, yet her spirit remains unbroken. Something in her eyes speaks to him of a shared wildness, a refusal to be tamed despite the world's best efforts. The rusted manacles fell to the wooden planks with a dull thud. Adeline rubbed her raw wrists, eyes darting between the giant captain and his cutthroat crew. Blood still pooled around the bodies of her former captors. "Jenkins," Blackwood's voice rumbled like distant thunder, "see that she has water and something to cover herself." The first mate's weathered face twisted in disapproval. "Captain, she's cargo. Worth more delivered." "She's not cargo," Blackwood cut him off, voice dropping dangerously low. "No person is cargo. Not on my ship." Jenkins muttered something under his breath, but retreated to fetch the requested items. The remaining pirates eyed her with curiosity, suspicion, and in some cases, something far worse. Adeline pressed her back against the damp hull, trying to make herself smaller despite her size. 3 months in chains had taught her caution. Freedom felt foreign now, a forgotten language she struggled to recall. "What's your name?" Blackwood asked. Keeping a respectful distance, she swallowed, her throat parched from days with minimal water. "Adeline." Her voice came out as a rasp. "Adeline Lambert." The memory of her capture crashed over her like a wave. The midnight raid on her father's merchant vessel. His desperate plea for mercy, silenced by steel. The humiliation as they examined her like livestock, laughing at her size, placing bets on what price she'd fetch in Charleston. The endless days below deck, fed just enough to keep her alive. Jenkins returned with a flask and a worn coat. He handed them to Blackwood rather than approach her directly. "Here," the captain offered both items, still maintaining his distance. "The water's clean. The coat was mine once. It's seen better days but should serve." Adeline snatched the flask, drinking greedily. Some water spilled down her chin, but she didn't care. The coat she took more carefully, wrapping it around herself. It smelled of sea salt and tobacco. "What happens now?" she finally asked. "Where are you taking me?" "That depends on you," Blackwood replied. "We'll make port in Nassau in 3 days. You're free to leave us there if you wish." "Free?" The word felt hollow, with no money, no connections, in a pirate port? A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Fair point, Miss Lambert. Then perhaps another option, stay aboard the Tempest until we reach a port more to your liking. Or," he hesitated, "or, join us. We could use someone with spirit." A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "A female pirate? And one of my stature? I've heard enough mockery to last a lifetime, Captain." His expression darkened. "Any man who mocks you on this ship answers to me. As for your size," his eyes swept over her substantial frame, "I judge people by their courage, not their dimensions. You have more steel in your spine than most men I've commanded." A commotion above deck spared her from responding. The captain turned to leave but paused at the ladder. "The choice is yours, Miss Lambert. But know this, on the Tempest you'd be crew, not cargo. Never cargo again." After he departed, Adeline examined the manacles that had held her. 3 months of her life, measured in rust and chafe marks. She'd watched the emerald coast of her home disappear from the ship's small porthole, certain she was bound for degradation and death. Now, impossibly, she had options. The ship creaked around her, and heavy footsteps crossed the deck above. These men were killers. She'd witnessed their brutality firsthand. Yet their captain had freed her without expectation or demand. Jenkins appeared at the ladder. "Captain says you can come above deck if you wish, or stay here." Your choice. Choice. Such a simple word for something so precious. Adeline pulled the oversized coat tighter and rose unsteadily to her feet. Her legs, weak from confinement, threatened to buckle. Stubbornly, she forced them to hold her weight. "I'll come up," she said. The bright Caribbean sun momentarily blinded her as she emerged. The air tasted of salt and freedom. Blackwood stood at the helm, massive hands on the wheel, eyes fixed on the horizon. Several crew members stared openly at her, but quickly returned to their duties when the captain's gaze swept over them. The Tempest cut through the water, leaving behind the merchant vessel where she'd suffered for so long. Adeline gripped the railing, feeling the spray on her face. 3 days to Nassau. 3 days to decide whether to trust this enigmatic captain and his ship of outlaws. 3 days to determine whether she was truly free, or merely exchanging one form of captivity for another. She looked down at her wrists, still bearing the red imprints of the manacles, and back to the captain. His eyes met hers briefly across the deck, unreadable as the ocean depths. The Tempest lived up to its name as it sliced through the Caribbean waters. Adeline stood at the starboard rail, watching the crew work with practiced efficiency. 2 days had passed since her rescue, and she remained an outsider, observed but not approached. In quiet moments she worked on her crude map, sketching coastlines from memory, and marking the painful journey that had brought her here. Each pencil stroke tracked the distance from her father's merchant vessel to this pirate ship, a journey measured in blood and tears. That Barbados. A voice startled her. A dark-skinned man with graying temples nodded at her drawing. Adeline instinctively covered the map. Yes. Proportions are off. Barbados is narrower. He mimicked the shape with weathered hands. I'm Dr. Solomon, ship's physician and occasional navigator. You're a doctor? She couldn't hide her surprise. A wry smile crossed his face. Was. Before the British decided my skin made my medical training irrelevant. How did you end up here? Captain Blackwood doesn't ask about a man's past, only his skills and loyalty. Solomon gestured around the deck. Most here are running from something. Finn there was an indentured servant. Martins was pressed into naval service. Rodriguez escaped the Inquisition. Adeline studied the diverse crew with new eyes. And Jenkins, first mate's story is his own to tell, though I'd not recommend asking. Solomon nodded toward her map. If you're plotting escape, Nassau's not your best option. Pirate Republic's no place for a woman alone. I'm not plotting escape, she replied, though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. Solomon raised an eyebrow but didn't challenge her. Captain wants to see you. His cabin. Trepidation filled her as she approached the captain's quarters. Despite Blackwood's respectful distance thus far, she couldn't forget what men with power typically wanted from women. She knocked hesitantly. Enter, came the deep voice. The captain's cabin defied her expectations. Bookshelves lined one wall. Milton, Shakespeare, maritime charts, and navigation texts. A polished desk held maps and navigational instruments. Blackwood himself sat reading, spectacles perched incongruously on his rugged face. He removed them when she entered. Miss Lambert, please, sit. She remained standing. You wanted to see me. Yes. He closed his book. Gulliver's Travels, she noted with surprise. We'll reach Nassau tomorrow. Have you decided your course? I have nowhere to go, she admitted. My father's dead. Our ship and cargo seized. I have no relatives in the colonies. Blackwood nodded. Then stay aboard until circumstances improve. You're welcome here. As what? I know nothing of sailing. Everyone earns their keep on the Tempest. Can you cook? She almost laughed. My father was a spice merchant. The British naval vessel had been easy prey, more merchant than warship. Now the Tempest sailed with replenished supplies and a new cannon. Adeline had remained below during the battle, but the victorious whoops told her all she needed to know. A week had passed since Nassau. Blackwood had gone ashore alone, returning with books and a small wooden box he took directly to his cabin. His privacy was absolute, the one space on the ship where even Jenkins knocked before entering. Adeline had settled into a routine. The crew now welcomed her cooking, and several had begun teaching her basic seamanship. Only Jenkins remained openly hostile, though others clearly shared his reservations. Captain wants you, Stubbs informed her one evening as she finished cleaning the galley. She found Blackwood in his cabin, writing in a leather-bound journal. He closed it when she entered, but not before she glimpsed neat, educated script, unexpected from a man who commanded through physical presence. You wanted to see me, Captain? Yes. Sit, please. He gestured to the chair opposite his desk. When she complied, he poured 2 glasses of amber liquid. Rum. The good kind, not the swill the men drink. She accepted the glass cautiously. Is something wrong? Wrong. No. I simply thought we might talk. You've been aboard nearly 3 weeks, yet I know little about you, beyond your name and your father's profession. Adeline sipped the rum, suppressing a cough at its strength. There's little to tell. My father was a merchant. I kept his accounts. You're educated then. My mother insisted, before she died. Said a woman needs her wits about her in a world run by men. She studied him over the rim of her glass. What of you, Captain? Your books suggest you weren't born to piracy. A shadow crossed his face. No one is born to piracy, Miss Lambert. It finds us when legitimate paths close. What closed your path? Blackwood's laugh held no humor. Injustice, corruption, the usual culprits. He rose and moved to the window. I was a naval officer once, youngest lieutenant in my squadron. What happened? I objected to certain practices. When objections failed, I took more direct action. His back remained to her, shoulders tense. The price was my commission, my reputation, and nearly my life. Outside, the sky darkened as clouds gathered on the horizon. Adeline sensed the conversation drifting into waters too personal, too dangerous. Storm coming, she observed, changing the subject. Yes. He turned back, composure restored. You've brought change to my ship, Miss Lambert. Change? The men respect you, even Jenkins, though he'd never admit it. I just cook. You do more than cook. You listen. You learn. Blackwood refilled their glasses. I've seen you studying the charts with Solomon. She flushed. I was curious. Curiosity is valuable. As is initiative. He reached for a book and handed it to her. Navigation. Not light reading, but you might find it useful. Their fingers brushed as she took the volume. Something electric passed between them, gone as quickly as it came. Adeline retreated behind formality. Thank you, Captain. The ship lurched suddenly, sending her stumbling forward. Blackwood caught her, his hands strong on her arms. The contact lasted only seconds before propriety reasserted itself, but the impression of his touch lingered. Storms arrived earlier than expected, he said, moving to the door. Stay here. It's safer. Alone in his cabin, Adeline examined the space more carefully. Maps and charts covered the walls. A small shelf held personal items, a silver pocket watch, a miniature portrait of a woman with eyes like his, and the wooden box she'd seen him bring aboard. Curiosity overcame caution. She opened the box to find a journal, older and more worn than the one he'd been writing in. Inside, the handwriting matched his, but the content surprised her. Poetry, observations, sketches of coastlines and creatures of the deep. The ship pitched violently, knocking the journal from her hands. Pages scattered, and as she gathered them, one entry caught her eye. Found another slaver today. Freed those I could. Too many already lost. When will it be enough? When will I find her? The door burst open. Blackwood stood drenched, water pooling at his feet. His eyes went to the open box and papers in her hands. I'm sorry, she began. I didn't mean all hands needed on deck. He cut her off, voice carefully controlled. The storm is worse than anticipated. Above, chaos reigned. Men struggled with sails while waves crashed over the rails. Jenkins shouted orders that were lost in the howling wind. "Secure the mainsail," Blackwood bellowed, immediately taking command. Adeline hesitated only briefly before plunging into the fray. She might not know sailing, but she understood emergencies. She worked alongside the men, hauling ropes and securing loose cargo. Hours later, soaked and exhausted, she realized something fundamental had changed. In fighting the storm together, she had crossed an invisible boundary. She was no longer a passenger, but part of the crew. And somewhere in that transition, Captain Elias Blackwood had become more than her rescuer. He had become a puzzle she desperately wanted to solve. Tortuga sprawled before them, a labyrinth of debauchery and lawlessness. After weeks at sea, the pirate haven promised both danger and opportunity. The Tempest had weathered the storm, but not without cost. Damaged rigging, torn sails, and depleted supplies necessitated this stop. "Keep close," Blackwood instructed as their longboat approached the docks. "Tortuga respects strength, not decency." Adeline nodded, unconsciously touching the small silver medallion hidden beneath her shirt, the last remnant of her mother, kept concealed even during her captivity. The intricate Celtic knotwork had been her talisman through the darkest days. The captain had selected a small shore party, himself, Jenkins, Solomon, and 3 trusted crew members. Adeline's inclusion had raised eyebrows, but Blackwood had silenced objections with a look. The docks reeked of rum, rotting fish, and unwashed bodies. Prostitutes called from balconies, while drunken pirates staggered between taverns. Adeline stayed close to Solomon, conscious of the stares her presence attracted. "First female many of these dogs have seen in months," the doctor muttered. "Stay vigilant." Blackwood led them to a merchant's shop, tucked between rowdier establishments. Inside, the proprietor, a diminutive man with calculating eyes, greeted the captain like an old friend. "Blackwood, twice in one season. Business must be good." "Good enough, Garrison. We need supplies and proper attire for Miss Lambert." The merchant's eyes swept over Adeline, taking in the ill-fitting men's clothing she'd been wearing since her rescue. "Interesting company you keep these days." While Blackwood negotiated for ship supplies, Garrison led Adeline to a back room filled with garments. "Not often I get to outfit a lady. These came from a Spanish merchant vessel. Quality goods." She selected practical items: trousers, shirts, a sturdy vest, and boots, but couldn't resist one indulgence, a deep blue dress, with silver embroidery. A woman still beneath the sailor's garb, Garrison observed with surprising gentleness. Adeline changed into her new clothes, relishing the simple dignity of proper attire. The merchant provided a private space, and she used the opportunity to check her hidden medallion, making sure it remained secure. Outside, Solomon waited. The captain's gone to gather information where to meet him at the Broken Compass Tavern. The street had grown more crowded, more volatile. Drunken brawls spilled from doorways, while pickpockets worked the distracted masses. A group of sailors blocked their path, eyes fixed on Adeline. "What's a woman your size doing in Tortuga?" the boldest asked, alcohol slurring his words. "Looking for proper company." Solomon stepped forward. "She's crew of the Tempest. Captain Blackwood's crew." Most backed away at Blackwood's name, but the ringleader persisted. "No woman is crew. She's someone's docs." Adeline felt something snap inside her. Weeks of tension, fear, and uncertainty crystallizing into rage. "I belong to no one," she said, voice steady. The man reached for her arm. Pretty words, her fist connected with his jaw before he could finish, a solid blow that sent him staggering. The self-defense lessons Blackwood had begun teaching her proved their worth. "Touch me again and lose your hand," she warned. Solomon's expression mixed surprise with approval. "The compass is this way." They found Blackwood in a shadowed corner, deep in conversation with a one-eyed captain. Both men fell silent as she approached. "Miss Lambert," Blackwood acknowledged, eyes noting her new attire. "I see Garrison served you well. Who's your new pet, Blackwood?" the stranger asked, leering. Miss Lambert is my crew, he answered flatly. Hector was just sharing news of the Marantha. The name struck Adeline like physical blow. The Marantha, the slave ship where she'd been held. What news? She asked, voice tight. Hector studied her with newfound interest. She's running a route between Barbados and Charleston, part of Prescott's fleet. Prescott? Solomon asked. Edmund Prescott, Blackwood explained, controls most of the illegal slave trade in these waters. The Marantha is one of a dozen ships in his operation. Adeline's hands trembled. He was there, on the ship, inspecting his cargo. Understanding darkened Blackwood's expression, he dismissed Hector with a coin and a nod. You have history with Prescott, he stated once they were alone. He's the one who decided my fate, who laughed at my size, but said I'd fetch a good price from certain buyers with specialized tastes. The memory turned her stomach. Blackwood's knuckles whitened around his glass. Prescott's protected by officials in Charleston and Nassau. Bribes keep his operation running. You hunt slavers, she said, not a question but a realization. That's why you freed me, why you attacked that merchant vessel. Something haunted moved behind his eyes. Yes, the tavern's noise receded as a moment of perfect clarity descended upon Adeline. She could walk away, use the money Blackwood had given her to book passage on a merchant vessel, perhaps return to England, start anew, or she could stay and help destroy the men who had stolen her freedom. Her medallion felt warm against her skin, a reminder of her mother's strength. I want to help you find Prescott. For the first time since she'd known him, Blackwood looked genuinely surprised. It's dangerous work, more dangerous than what I've already survived. His gaze held hers for a long moment before he nodded. We sail at dawn. The moon cast silver ribbons across the water as the Tempest sailed south from Tortuga. Most of the crew had retired, leaving only the night watch and a few restless souls on deck. Adeline found Blackbook at the bow, a solitary silhouette against the star-filled sky. You should be resting, he said without turning, as should you, Captain. His smile was barely visible in the darkness. The sea at night brings clarity. They stood in comfortable silence until Blackwood reached inside his coat, producing a folded paper. Found this in Tortuga. Thought you should see it. Adeline unfolded the wanted poster. Blackwood's face stared back at her. Beneath bold letters, offering £500 for his capture. Piracy, theft, interference with colonial trade, she read aloud. They omitted the parts they don't want public, he said quietly. The slaves freed, the naval officers exposed for taking bribes, the governors whose investments in human cargo I've sunk to the bottom of the ocean. Is that why you do this? For justice. Blackwood's hands gripped the railing. Justice is part of it. But there's more. He hesitated, then continued. I had a sister, Margaret. Clever, kind. Everything good in our family resided in her. Adeline heard the weight of loss in his voice. What happened? Our father died, leaving debts. I was at sea with the Navy. By the time I returned, creditors had taken everything, including Margaret. His voice hardened. She was sold to cover my father's debts, shipped to the colonies as an indentured servant. By the time I tracked her to Charleston, she'd been sold again, this time to a plantation in the Spanish territories. Did you find her? 3 years too late. The conditions, they worked her to death. Something raw and broken escaped him, a sound between a sigh and a growl. Her grave wasn't even marked. Adeline placed her hand over his on the railing. I'm sorry. Prescott was involved. One link in the chain that destroyed her. I've spent 7 years hunting men like him, dismantling their operations piece by piece. He turned to face her. Every person I free is a small redemption for failing her. The confession hung between them, changing the air, making it heavier with shared pain. Adeline found herself speaking of things she'd kept buried. My mother died when I was 14. My father, changed after that, grew cold, focused only on his business. When pirates attacked our ship, he offered me to them first, hoping they'd spare him. The memory still cut deep. They killed him anyway. Blackwood's expression darkened. The men who took you, dead now. You saw to that. She looked out at the endless horizon. My size has always made me an object of ridicule. But on that slave ship, it made me valuable merchandise. Prescott said men would pay extra for a curiosity like me. They fell silent again, two souls sharing wounds that wouldn't heal but might hurt less for being acknowledged. Later, below deck, Blackwood uncorked a bottle of rum and poured 2 generous measures. The crew's quarters were empty, most men preferring to spend their shore leave indulging in Tortuga's pleasures. To survival, he toasted. The rum burned pleasantly. Adeline had never been one for spirits, but life aboard a pirate vessel had changed many of her habits. "Show me how to fight," she said suddenly. "Properly, I mean. That man in Tortuga, I struck him on instinct, but I want to know how to defend myself." Blackwood considered her request, then nodded. "Stand up." He pushed aside a table, creating space in the cramped quarters. "Fighting isn't about strength. It's about leverage and opportunity. Even the strongest man has vulnerabilities." For the next hour, he taught her the basics: how to stand, where to strike, how to use an opponent's momentum against them. His instructions were clear, his demonstrations precise but never crossing the boundaries of propriety. "The eyes, throat and groin are your targets," he explained. "Don't hesitate. Don't pull back. One solid strike can give you the seconds you need to escape." By the time they finished, Adeline was breathless but exhilarated. For the first time since her capture, she felt a measure of control returning. "You're a natural," Blackwood commented, pouring more rum. The compliment warmed her more than the alcohol. "Will we find Prescott? Eventually, men like him believe themselves untouchable, which makes them predictable." He studied her over the rim of his glass. "When we do find him, what will you do?" The question gave her pause. Revenge had never been in her nature, yet the thought of confronting the man who treated her as property filled her with cold determination. "I'll look him in the eye as an equal, not as merchandise," she finally answered. "Beyond that, I haven't decided." From the shadows, Jenkins' voice startled them both. "Touching scene. The captain and his charity case, plotting vengeance." Blackwood's posture shifted subtly, alert but controlled. "You're drunk, Jenkins. Drunk enough to speak truth." The first mate stepped into the lantern light. "You should tell her the rest, Captain. About the ships you've sunk, the men you've killed who had nothing to do with slavers, about what happened to your last woman." "That's enough." Blackwood's voice carried deadly warning. Jenkins turned to Adeline. "Ask him about Elizabeth. Ask what happens to women who get too close to our noble captain." He retreated before Blackwood could respond, leaving behind questions that hung in the air like gunpowder smoke. "Who was Elizabeth?" Adeline asked softly. Blackwood's face closed like a fortress gate. "A story for another time." Spanish colors. Galleon off the starboard bow. The cry from the crow's nest sent the Tempest into controlled chaos. Men rushed to battle stations while Blackwood assessed the approaching vessel through his spyglass. "She's riding low, likely carrying silver from the Spanish Main," he announced. "Prepare to engage." 2 weeks had passed since Tortuga. 2 weeks of Adeline learning the ways of the ship, of daily combat lessons with Blackwood, of carefully avoiding any mention of the mysterious Elizabeth. Jenkins had remained sullenly silent on the matter, though his disapproving glances spoke volumes. Now, as the crew prepared for battle, Adeline found herself torn between retreating below deck and remaining to help. The decision was made for her when Solomon grabbed her arm. "We'll need you in the surgery. Battles mean wounds." The ship's small surgery was barely more than a closet with a table, but Solomon had organized his instruments with military precision. "Prepare bandages," he instructed, "and brace yourself. It gets loud." The first cannon blast nearly knocked her off her feet. The galleon had fired early, the shot falling short, but signaling its willingness to fight, rather than surrender. The Tempest answered with a devastating broadside that splintered the Spanish ship's railing. Adeline worked mechanically, tearing clean linen into strips, while above her feet pounded across the deck. The thunder of cannons made conversation impossible. Solomon moved with practiced efficiency, laying out instruments and preparing poultices. A particularly violent impact rocked the ship. Adeline steadied herself against the wall, heart pounding. This was the reality of pirate life, not just freedom and rum and camaraderie, but violence and the constant specter of death. The surgery door burst open. 2 men carried in a third, blood soaking his shirt. Cannon recoil broke loose, caught him in the chest, one explained, laying the injured man on the table. Solomon cut away the shirt, revealing a deep gash across the ribs. "Hold him," he ordered Adeline. She placed her hands on the man's shoulders, recognizing him as Martins, one of the younger crew members who had been teaching her knots. His eyes were wide with fear. "You'll be fine," she assured him, though she had no way of knowing if that was true. "I need light," Solomon said sharply. Adeline held a lantern with one hand while maintaining pressure on Martin's shoulder with the other. The doctor worked quickly, cleaning the wound and assessing the damage. "Ribs are intact, muscle damage only. He's lucky." More wounded arrived as the battle raged. Burns, splinter wounds, a broken arm. Adeline moved between them, following Solomon's instructions, pushing aside her own fear to focus on their need. Above, the cannon fire had stopped, replaced by the sounds of boarding shouts, pistol shots, the clash of steel. The Spanish were putting up a fight. The surgery door crashed open again. Jenkins stumbled in, supporting a semi-conscious pirate with a head wound. Blood streamed from a scalp laceration. Rodriguez got hit with a belaying pin. Jenkins explained, helping the man to a bench. As Solomon turned his attention to the new arrival, a scream echoed from above, raw and agonized. Jenkins cursed and rushed back on deck. Adeline hesitated, only briefly before following. The scene above was chaos. Pirates and Spanish sailors fought across both vessels, now lashed together. Near the mainmast, a Spanish officer had pinned a pirate to the deck with his sword and was reaching for a pistol to finish the job. Without thinking, Adeline grabbed an abandoned belaying pin and charged. The officer turned just as she swung, connecting solidly with his arm. The pistol discharged harmlessly into the air as he staggered backward. Blackwood appeared from nowhere, engaging the officer with brutal efficiency. 3 moves and the Spaniard lay dead. "Get back below," Blackwood shouted at her, but his attention was already drawn to the next threat. Adeline retreated, only to find another wounded pirate struggling could crawl away from the fighting. She helped him to the surgery, where Solomon worked frantically to keep pace with the casualties. The battle lasted another 20 minutes before the Spanish surrendered. By then, the surgery held 8 wounded men, 3 critically. Adeline worked alongside Solomon until her arms ached and her dress was stained crimson. When Blackwood finally appeared in the doorway, his own face was streaked with blood and gunpowder. "How many?" he asked Solomon. "2 won't last the night. The rest should recover." Blackwood's eyes found Adeline, taking in her bloodied appearance. "Are you injured?" "No." Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. "The blood isn't mine," he nodded, relief briefly crossing his features before his captain's mask returned. The galleon carried silver as expected, and something else, a manifest listing Prescott's ships and their routes. That news penetrated Adeline's exhaustion. "His entire operation, a significant portion. We've crippled 1 vessel already. Now we can target others." Later, as the wounded rested and the crew celebrated their prize, Blackwood found Adeline at the rail, watching moonlight dance across the waves. "You saved Williams today," he said quietly. "The Spanish officer would have killed him if you hadn't intervened." She hadn't known the pirate's name until now. "I acted without thinking. Sometimes that's the difference between life and death." Blackwood held out a small package wrapped in cloth. "For you." Inside lay an ornate dagger in a leather sheath. The handle was inlaid with mother-of-pearl, the blade damascene steel. Spanish officers, good steel, well balanced. Blackwood demonstrated how to hold it properly. "Keep it with you. Always. The weight of the weapon felt both strange and right in her hand. "Thank you, you're one of us now," he said simply. The crew sees it too. As if to confirm his words, several pirates raised their cups to her as they passed. Even Jenkins gave a grudging nod of acknowledgement. For the first time since her father's ship was taken, Adeline felt the beginning of a genuine smile. Candlelight flickered across the tattered star chart spread on the captain's table. The yellowed parchment showed the Caribbean with unusual detail, hidden coves, unmarked reefs, and shipping lanes rarely found on naval maps. The Spanish officer was Prescott's paymaster, Blackwood explained, tracing a route with his finger. These markings show the rendezvous points for his slave ships. Adeline studied the map, memories surfacing of her own terrible journey. They gather here before sailing to the colonies, yes. An island fortress, Puerto de Cadenas, Port of Chains, she translated, feeling ill. A month had passed since the battle with the Spanish galleon. Adeline had grown more confident in her place aboard the Tempest, learning navigation from Solomon and swordplay from Blackwood himself. The dagger he'd given her rarely left her side. "The fortress is heavily defended," Blackwood continued. "Cannon emplacements, garrison of soldiers, deep harbor that prevents close approach. Yet you intend to attack it." His eyes met hers, grey and resolute. "I intend to destroy it." Jenkins entered without knocking, his perpetual scowl deepening at the sight of Adeline in the captain's quarters. "Look out, spotted sails. Merchant vessel, Dutch colors. Maintain course," Blackwood ordered. "We have bigger prey." After Jenkins departed, Adeline leaned forward. "I want to help with the fortress." "You already help. Your knowledge of Prescott, not from the ship," she interrupted. "I want to go with you, when you infiltrate the fortress." Blackwood stared at her, as if she'd suggested walking on water. "Absolutely not. I've been training for weeks. I can handle myself. It's not about your abilities, it's about my being a woman." Fire rose in her voice. "Or is it my size that concerns you? It's about not sending you back into the hands of men who already hurt you once." His rare display of emotion silenced her. More quietly, he added, "I won't risk that." "It's not your risk to take," she countered. "It's mine." The tension between them crackled like storm-charged air. Something had been building between them these past weeks, unspoken, unacknowledged, but undeniably present. Now it threatened to ignite. Blackwood broke the stalemate by turning back to the map. "We'll discuss this later. First, we need a plan." They worked in strained silence, marking approach routes and defensive positions. Eventually, the strategy began to take shape, a daring raid requiring stealth, precision, and more than a little luck. When Adeline finally left the captain's quarters, the night sky was awash with stars. She found Solomon at his usual spot by the mainmast, smoking his pipe. "The captain and I disagreed," she admitted, settling beside him. Solomon's laugh was smoke and wisdom. "Notice that?" Half the ship noticed. "He treats me like I'm made of glass." "No." The doctor tapped his pipe against the railing. "He treats you like someone he can't bear to lose." The implication hung in the air between them. Adeline changed the subject. "Tell me about Elizabeth." Solomon's expression closed. "Not my story to tell. Jenkins mentioned her. Said I should ask what happens to women who get close to the captain. Jenkins talks too much." Solomon sighed. "Elizabeth was before my time. I know only pieces. She was the governor's daughter in Nassau. She and the captain were close. It ended badly." "How badly?" "She died. That's all I know for certain." He fixed her with a serious look. "The captain carries ghosts, Adeline. We all do, but his haunt him more than most." Later that night, unable to sleep, Adeline found herself back on deck. The ship was quiet, only the night watch and helmsman on duty. To her surprise, Blackwood also stood at the rail, staring at the horizon. She joined him, maintaining a respectful distance. "I couldn't sleep either," she offered. He acknowledged her with a glance. "The fortress weighs on my mind." And our disagreement? A faint smile touched his lips. That too. They stood in companionable silence before he spoke again. You've changed since I found you in chains. I should hope so. Not just in strength or skill. There's a certainty about you now. I know who I am, she said simply. Even when I was merchandise, I never forgot that. But now I also know what I'm capable of. The moonlight silvered his profile as he turned to her. And what is that? Whatever is necessary. She met his gaze steadily. I won't be left behind, Captain. Not for this. Prescott's operation stole my life once. I deserve to be part of ending it. Something shifted in his expression. Respect, resignation, perhaps even admiration. You'd go whether I agreed or not, wouldn't you? I'd prefer your blessing, but yes. The admission hung between them. Blackwood moved closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him, despite the cool night air. You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met, he said, voice low. I doubt that's true. His hand rose, hesitated, then gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The touch sent electricity down her spine. For a moment the world narrowed to just the two of them. His calloused fingers against her skin, her breath catching in her throat. Jenkins' voice shattered the moment. Captain, you're needed. Blackwood stepped back, the spell broken. What is it? Ship approaching. No colors showing. As Blackwood moved to investigate, Adeline remained at the rail, her heart racing from what had almost happened. The fortress, Prescott, the dangers ahead, all momentarily overshadowed by the captain's touch and what it might mean. When she finally returned to her cabin, sleep remained elusive, her dreams haunted by chains, fortresses, and storm-grey eyes. The approaching vessel flew no colors until it was within hailing distance. Then, with theatrical flourish, it raised a black flag, emblazoned with a crimson skull, a design Adeline had never seen among the various pirate banners. Graves, Blackwood muttered, his expression darkening. The name rippled through the crew, generating murmurs of recognition and wariness. Even Jenkins seemed discomfited. Who is Graves? Adeline asked Solomon, as they watched the ship draw alongside. Captain Marcus Graves, Blackwood's oldest rival. Some say they were once friends. Before, he trailed off as a gangplank was secured between the vessels. A tall figure strode across the makeshift bridge. Unlike Blackwood's practical attire, Graves dressed with flamboyant extravagance, velvet coat, gold-buckled shoes, and a hat adorned with peacock feathers. Yet despite the finery, he moved with the deadly grace of a predator. Elias, his voice boomed across the deck. Still sailing this leaking tub? I'd have thought you'd have something grander by now. Blackwood's response was measured. The tempest serves her purpose. What brings you to these waters, Marcus? The same whispers that reached your ears, I imagine. Graves surveyed the crew, his gaze lingering on Adeline. Though you've clearly found distractions I haven't. Blackwood stiffened. State your business or be on your way. So hostile. Graves clutched his chest in mock offense. After all we've been through together. He lowered his voice. I know about Porto de Cadenas, Elias. I know what you're planning. The two captains retreated to Blackwood's quarters, leaving the crews to eye each other warily across the gap between ships. Adeline helped Solomon inventory medical supplies, but her thoughts remained on the mysterious visitor and his connection to Blackwood. Hours later, as the sun dipped toward the horizon, Graves emerged on deck. By now a tense familiarity had developed between the crews, some even sharing rum and stories. Graves spotted Adeline and approached with exaggerated courtesy. The famous Miss Lambert, your reputation precedes you. She raised an eyebrow. I wasn't aware I had a reputation. The woman who tamed Blackwood's crew, who fights like a man but blushes like a maid. Oh yes, word travels. His smile revealed gold teeth. He hasn't told you about me, has he? Should he have? Graves laughed. Elias and I share a colorful history. We sailed together once, under the great Benjamin Hornigold. Then came the pardon offer. respectability for those who renounced piracy. His eyes took on a distant quality. Elias was tempted, so very tempted. What changed his mind? Ah, now there's the meat of it. Graves leaned closer. Ask him about Nassau, about the governor's daughter, about what happens when Elias Blackwood tries to leave the sea behind. Before she could respond, Blackwood appeared. That's enough reminiscing, Marcus. Graves straightened, amused. Just getting acquainted with your crew member. We sail at dawn, Blackwood stated flatly. Together. The pronouncement sent whispers through both crews. Graves merely nodded, as if he'd expected nothing less. Later, Adeline found Blackwood alone at the helm, his expression remote as he studied the stars. You've made an alliance with Graves, she observed. A temporary arrangement. The fortress is too well defended for one ship alone. You don't trust him. Blackwood's laugh held no humor. I trust him to act in his own interest, which aligns with ours. For now, Adeline hesitated, then pressed forward. He mentioned Nassau, and a governor's daughter. The captain's knuckles whitened on the wheel. Graves talks too much. Was that Elizabeth? The question hung in the air like cannon smoke. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Yeah, the word emerged reluctantly. Elizabeth Hastings, the governor's only child. You loved her. It wasn't a question, but he answered anyway. I thought I could leave this life behind, become respectable again. For her. What happened? Pain flashed across his features. Her father discovered our plans to elope. He had me arrested, charged with piracy and kidnapping. Elizabeth testified on my behalf, destroyed her reputation defending me. His voice grew hollow. While I sat in prison awaiting trial, a fever swept through Nassau. She was among the first to succumb. Adeline's heart ached for him. I'm sorry. Her father blamed me, said her association with a pirate had brought God's judgment. Blackwood's expression hardened. When I escaped execution, I returned to the only life left to me. And Graves, he never forgave me for trying to leave piracy behind. Called it betrayal of our brotherhood. Blackwood's eyes met hers. Now he hunts slavers for the bounties, while I hunt them for different reasons. Our methods differ, but our targets align. Can you trust him for this mission? Trust, he considered the word. No, but I understand him. Graves wants Prescott's gold. I want his operation dismantled. For now, that's enough. The conversation lapsed into silence, both aware of boundaries crossed, truth revealed that couldn't be unshared. Finally, Adeline spoke. I still intend to be part of the landing party. To her surprise, Blackwood nodded. I know. Solomon will prepare suitable attire for you. You'll go as my second, not Jenkins. Jenkins will command the Tempest in my absence. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Besides, I've learned it's easier to keep you in sight than to argue. As she turned to leave, his voice stopped her. Adeline, Graves is dangerous, especially to women. Keep your distance. The warning sent a chill through her, not for her own safety, but for what it suggested about the man who now sailed alongside them, his crimson skull flag stark against the darkening sky. The moonlight transformed the two ships into skeletal apparitions as they sailed in tandem toward Puerto de Cadenas. 5 days had passed since Graves' arrival, 5 days of uneasy cooperation as the captains finalized their assault plan. Adeline discovered the small vial while inventorying medical supplies with Solomon. Glass with a silver cap containing clear liquid that smelled of bitter almonds. What's this? She asked, holding it up. Solomon frowned. Not mine. Looks like poison. Extract of cherry laurel, perhaps. Why would someone hide poison among medical supplies? The doctor's expression darkened. A question worth asking. When they brought the vial to Blackwood, his reaction was controlled, but severe. Keep this between us, he ordered after examining it. Say nothing to Graves or his men. You think there's a traitor? Adeline asked. I think someone doesn't want our mission to succeed. He secured the vial in his desk drawer. Graves has as many enemies as I do. This could target either of us. That night, while most of the crew slept, Adeline walked the deck restlessly. The fortress was only 2 days' sail away according to Blackwood's charts. Soon they would face Prescott's operation and perhaps discover who among them couldn't be trusted. A furtive movement near the captain's quarters caught her attention. She slipped her hand to the dagger at her hip and moved silently forward. 2 men conversed in hushed tones, Rodriguez from the Tempest and a sailor from Graves' ship. Their posture suggested secrecy. Conspiracy expects resistance, but not prepared for what's waiting. The strange sailor muttered. "How many?" Rodriguez asked. "Double the usual garrison. They know someone's coming." Adeline's blood ran cold. She retreated before being discovered, mind racing with implications. Was Rodriguez the traitor, or was he merely gathering intelligence? She debated waking Blackwood, but hesitated. Accusations without proof could fracture the crew at a critical moment. Instead, she resolved to watch Rodriguez closely. The next day brought increasing tension as they approached enemy waters. Blackwood and Graves gathered their officers to review the final plan. Adeline stood among them, now officially recognized as Blackwood's second for the land assault. "The fortress has 3 tiers of defense," Blackwood explained, pointing to the map: harbor cannons, outer walls, and the inner keep. "We'll approach at night with minimal crew, posing as a merchant vessel seeking shelter." Graves continued, "Once inside the harbor, my men will neutralize the cannon crews while Blackwood's team secures the main gate. The objective is to free the captives and destroy Prescott's operation, not simply to plunder." The last part seemed directed at his own men, some of whom frowned at the emphasis on liberation over profit. Jenkins spoke up. "What if they're expecting us? Why would they be?" Graves countered too quickly. Adeline watched Rodriguez during the exchange. His face revealed nothing, but his fingers drummed nervously against his thigh. After the meeting dispersed, she followed him at a distance. He moved with purpose toward the ship's bow, where the lookout had reported a merchant vessel on the horizon. As the Tempest adjusted course to avoid the potential witness, Rodriguez disappeared below deck. Adeline slipped after him, careful to keep her footsteps silent. In the dim corridor, she heard his voice from the cargo hold, speaking not to another person but as if reading aloud. Approaching target: 2 ships, flying Dutch colors. One confirmed as the Tempest. Second believed to be the Crimson Skull. Estimated arrival in 2 days. A coded message. Adeline moved closer, peering through a crack in the door. Rodriguez sat alone, a small writing desk before him, carefully transcribing his message onto thin paper. She backed away, bumping into a solid form behind her. Strong hands gripped her shoulders. "Curious, aren't we?" Jenkins' voice was low in her ear. "Rodriguez is sending messages," she whispered, "warning the fortress." Jenkins' expression remained unreadable. "I know, you know." Outrage flashed through her. "And you've done nothing?" "The captain knows too." Jenkins released her. "Rodriguez has been under watch since Tortuga. We feed him false information, wrong courses, incorrect timing, relief mixed with confusion. Why not just confront him and lose our chance to find who he reports to?" Jenkins gave her a look that bordered on respect. "The captain thought you might discover this. Said to tell you everything if you did. Blackwood anticipated I would spy on a crew member." Jenkins almost smiled. "He said you were too observant to miss the signs." Later, alone with Blackwood in his quarters, Adeline processed this new complexity. "You should have told me about Rodriguez," she said. "I needed his handler to believe the intelligence was reliable. The fewer people who knew, the better. You didn't trust me." Blackwood looked up from his charts. "I trust you more than anyone on this ship. That's why I kept you apart from this. If Rodriguez suspected you knew." The unfinished thought hung between them. Adeline recognized the protection for what it was. Not doubt in her abilities, but concern for her safety. "Have you identified his contact?" "Not yet, but the poison suggests someone close to our planning. Someone with access to both ships." A knock interrupted them. Solomon entered, his expression grave. "Captain, we have a problem. I found this message in the ship's log. He handed over a folded paper. Blackwood read it, his face hardening. "Where did you find this?" "Hidden in the binding. It's not in any hand I recognize." Blackwood passed the note to Adeline. The message was brief, but chilling. "They know you're coming. Prescott has prepared a welcome." "The fortress is a trap. Who left this?" she asked. "Someone who wants us to abandon the mission," Blackwood replied. "Or someone warning us genuinely. Graves, possibly. Or someone in his crew." Blackwood folded the note carefully. "Either way we proceed, but with heightened caution." That night, as Adeline finally sought her bed, the weight of hidden dangers pressed upon her. Rodriguez's betrayal, the mysterious note, the poison vial, all pointed to treachery close at hand. Yet the fortress drew nearer with each passing hour, carrying them toward a confrontation where loyalties would be tested and secrets revealed. In the darkness, she clutched her mother's medallion and prayed for clarity amid the whispers of betrayal. Gray clouds gathered on the horizon, a wall of darkness advancing across the previously clear sky. The air grew heavy with moisture and anticipation as both ships altered course, seeking deeper water before the storm hit. "It's going to be a bad one," Solomon observed, securing his medical supplies. "Barometers falling faster than I've seen in years." Adeline helped him stow delicate instruments. "Will it delay our arrival at the fortress?" "By a day at least. Might be a blessing, gives us more time to identify our traitor." Rodriguez remained under subtle surveillance, his every movement tracked by crew members, loyal to Blackwood. Yet he'd made no further attempts to send messages, creating a tense lull in their investigation. The first raindrops fell like bullets, hard and fast, as sailors scrambled to reef sails. Wind whipped across the deck, carrying stinging salt spray. Blackwood stood at the helm, his massive frame braced against the growing violence of the sea. "Below deck," he ordered, when he spotted Adeline. "Now." She complied reluctantly, descending to the relative safety of the gun deck. Through the portholes she watched as the sky turned nearly black at midday. Lighting split the darkness, illuminating mountainous waves that threatened to swallow both vessels. The storm's fury grew over the next hours. The tempest groaned under the assault, timbers creaking in protest. Most of the crew gathered on the gun deck, riding out the tempest with rum and dice games to distract from their precarious situation. Graves's ship, visible only during lightning flashes, fared worse. The smaller vessel pitched dangerously, struggling to maintain position alongside the tempest. "They'll need to cut loose," Jenkins predicted grimly. "Two ships this close in a storm this fierce is asking for a collision." As if summoned by his words, Blackwood descended from the quarterdeck, drenched and grim. "We've lost sight of the Crimson Skull. Last we saw, they were heading southeast, running before the wind." "Abandoning us?" Adeline asked. "Saving themselves. Can't blame them." Blackwood stripped off his sodden coat. "We'll rendezvous when the weather clears." A violent lurch sent several men tumbling across the deck. Barrels broke loose from their moorings, crashing into the bulkhead. Adeline narrowly avoided being crushed, Blackwood's strong arm pulling her clear at the last moment. "My cabin," he said when the immediate danger passed. "It's safer." They fought their way through the pitching vessel to the captain's quarters. Inside, the chaos was just as evident. Books scattered, furniture overturned, water sloshing across the floor from a leaking porthole. Blackwood secured the door behind them. For the first time since she'd known him, he looked genuinely concerned. "If this keeps up, we may need to scuttle some of the guns. Lighten the ship. That bad? I've seen worse." He attempted a reassuring smile. But not often. They worked together to secure loose items and bail the incoming water. The shared labor created a strange intimacy, a bubble of connection amid the storm's fury. When the worst of the immediate damage was contained, they collapsed into the remaining chairs, exhausted but alive. From his pocket, Blackwood withdrew a small locket. He opened it to reveal a miniature portrait of a young woman with his grey eyes and determined chin. "Margaret," he said softly. "My sister. I carry her with me always. Adeline recognized the rare gift of his vulnerability. She was beautiful, she was strong, like you. He closed the locket carefully. In another life you would have been friends, I think. The ship pitched again, sending them both sliding across the wet floor. Blackwood caught her against him, their faces suddenly inches apart. The storm forgotten, Adeline found herself lost in his gaze, in the warmth of his arms around her. "Adeline," he began, his voice rough with emotion. A thunderous crash interrupted whatever he might have said. The ship heeled violently to starboard, throwing them against the wall. "Captain," Jenkins' voice carried even through the storm, "and heavy door. Mainmast is damaged. We need you." Blackwood helped Adeline to her feet, his touch lingering. "Stay here, please." After he left, she paced the cabin restlessly. Through the porthole she could see crew members fighting the storm, struggling with ropes and rigging amid cascading water. Blackwood moved among them, his powerful presence bringing order to chaos. Her gaze fell on his desk, where the corner of a paper protruded from beneath a map. Furious, she tugged it free and found herself staring at a letter addressed to Governor Hastings of Nassau. "Sir, by the time you read this I will have fulfilled my oath. Prescott's operation will be dismantled, and with it, the last link in the chain that led to Margaret's death. I do not expect to survive this final mission, nor do I wish to. 7 years is long enough to live with ghosts. I ask only that you acknowledge what your daughter knew. I loved her truly, and would have honored her all my days had fate allowed. With respect, Elias Blackwood." Adeline's hands trembled. This was no mere mission for Blackwood. It was intended as his last, a suicide mission, a final reckoning, before joining the ghosts that haunted him. She was still absorbing this revelation when the door burst open. Blackwood entered, water streaming from his clothes, his expression grim. "We've been sabotaged," he stated flatly. "Someone damaged the mainmast supports before the storm hit. It wasn't coincidence. It was timed to fail when we needed it most." Before she could respond, he noticed the letter in her hand. Their eyes met in a moment of perfect understanding, her discovery of his fatalistic plans, his recognition of her awareness. "You intended to die at the fortress," she said quietly. "I intended to finish what I started, whatever the cost. And now," the question hung between them, layered with meaning that transcended the immediate crisis. Blackwood moved closer, taking the letter from her hands. "Now I find myself with unexpected reasons to survive." The confession, simple yet profound, shifted something fundamental between them. As the storm raged outside, Adeline made a silent vow. She would not let him face his demons alone, nor surrender to them. "The saboteur," she said, returning to the immediate threat. "Do you think it was Rodriguez?" "No. This required knowledge of ships, of precisely where to weaken the mast." His jaw tightened. "I think our traitor is much closer to command than we believed." Dawn broke over a sea still churning with the storm's aftermath. The tempest had survived, though not without cost. The damaged mainmast had been jury-rigged, and 3 men had been lost overboard. During the night, of Graves' ship there was no sign. Blackwood called his officers to the great cabin. His face was granite as he laid a blood-smeared coin on the table, a Spanish doubloon, found in Rodriguez's quarters, he explained, along with detailed notes about our course and plans for the fortress assault. Jenkins frowned. "Payment for his treachery." "1 payment," Blackwood corrected. "There were marks indicating multiple coins. The rest are missing. He's been sharing our plans with someone," Solomon concluded. "But who? That's what we're going to find out." Blackwood's gaze swept the assembled men. "Rodriguez is in the brig. It's time we had a conversation with him." Adeline followed as they descended to the ship's bowels. Rodriguez sat huddled in the corner of his cell, face bruised from the struggle when he'd been captured. "Captain," he acknowledged, eyes darting nervously. "I can explain." "Save your breath," Blackwood cut him off. "We found the coin. We know you've been feeding information to Prescott's people. Not Prescott. Rodriguez protested. I would never. Then who? Jenkins demanded. Who paid you to betray your shipmates? Rodriguez looked trapped, desperate. He'll kill me if I tell you. And what do you think I'll do if you don't? Blackwood's voice was dangerously soft. The prisoner swallowed hard. It was Jenkins. A stunned silence fell over the group. Jenkins's face contorted with rage. Lying bastard, I'll gut you where you stand. Blackwood raised a hand, silencing his first mate. Explain. He approached me in Tortuga, Rodriguez continued, words tumbling out. Said he had contacts who would pay for information about the Tempest movements. Later, he told me they were interested specifically in your plans for Porto de Cadenas. That's absurd, Jenkins sputtered. Captain, you can't believe I didn't say I believed anything, Blackwood interrupted. Continue, Rodriguez. I passed messages at ports, left notes in dead drops. Jenkins paid me in Spanish gold. Rodriguez met Blackwood's eyes. I didn't know it was Prescott until after the Spanish galleon. When I found out, I tried to back out. But Jenkins threatened my family in Havana. Convenient that he accuses the one person who can't be both here and elsewhere. Jenkins sneered. I've been at your side for 7 years, Captain. My loyalty is beyond question. Is it? Blackwood turned to face his first mate. You've made no secret of your disapproval of our crusade against the slavers. You've argued repeatedly that we should return to traditional targets. Profitable targets, Jenkins corrected. There's no money in freeing slaves. There is if you're working both sides. Blackwood's voice hardened. If you're warning the slavers of our coming, then claiming shares of our prizes. Jenkins' hand moved toward his pistol, but Blackwood was faster. In one fluid motion he drew his own weapon and leveled it at his first mate's chest. Don't, he warned. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Jenkins lunged, not for Blackwood but for Adeline, grabbing her and pressing a knife to her throat. Back away, Captain, he ordered, or she bleeds. Adeline remained perfectly still, feeling the cold steel against her skin. Her eyes locked with Blackwood's, conveying a silent message. He gave an almost imperceptible nod. You won't make it off this ship, Blackwood said, lowering his pistol slightly. I don't need to, just to the longboat. Jenkins began backing toward the stairs, dragging Adeline with him. The Crimson Skull will find me. Graves pays better than you ever did. Graves? Solomon exclaimed. He's part of this? Jenkins laughed bitterly. Who do you think arranged everything? Graves has been working with Prescott for years. The rivalry with Blackwood, a convenient fiction to hide their partnership. As they reached the foot of the stairs, Adeline made her move. The dagger Blackwood had given her slid from its hidden sheath into her palm. With precision born of weeks of practice, she drove it backward, finding the soft spot between Jenkins' ribs. He gasped, his grip loosening. Adeline twisted away as Blackwood surged forward, tackling Jenkins to the ground. The struggle was brief, but violent. When it ended, Jenkins lay still, blood pooling beneath him. He's alive, Blackwood confirmed, binding the wound Adeline had inflicted. And he'll face justice when we reach port. Later, in the privacy of Blackwood's cabin, they assessed their situation. If Graves is working with Prescott, the fortress will be expecting us, Adeline said. Yes, Blackwood studied the map grimly. And the Crimson Skull likely survived the storm. They'll reach Porto de Cadenas before us. We should abandon the mission. Regroup, find another approach. No, his determination was absolute. This changes our tactics, not our optic. Prescott's operation ends, with or without Graves' assistance. It's suicide, she protested. Even before, the odds were against us. Now we have the element of surprise. A grim smile touched his lips. They'll expect us to retreat once we discover the betrayal. Instead, we press forward, but with a different plan. As night fell, Adeline found herself alone with Blackwood once more. The ship creaked around them, wounds from the storm still evident in her timbers. "You saved my life today," he acknowledged quietly. "You've saved mine several times over." His hand found hers in the dim lantern light. "I meant what I said during the storm. Before, I saw no future beyond Puerto de Cadenas. Now I find myself looking beyond it." The admission hung between them, fragile and precious. Adeline's fingers tightened around his. "Show me," she whispered. The kiss, when it came, was neither hesitant nor rushed, but a culmination of everything that had built between them: respect, understanding, and something deeper neither had dared name. His hands framed her face with surprising gentleness, while hers clutched the front of his shirt, anchoring herself to him. When they parted, breathless, the world had changed irrevocably. "If we survive this," he murmured against her hair. "What then?" "Then we decide together," she answered. "But first, we survive." Their second kiss carried the weight of that promise, and the uncertainty of whether they could keep it. Puerto de Cadenas rose from the mist like a vision from a nightmare, stone walls climbing from jagged cliffs, cannon emplacements visible even from a distance. The fortress dominated a small island, its harbor protected by a narrow channel that forced approaching vessels within easy range of the defensive batteries. The Tempest lay hidden in a secluded cove on a neighboring island, her profile disguised with cut foliage. Through his spyglass, Blackwood observed the fortress and the ships anchored in its harbor. "The Crimson Skull is there," he confirmed, passing the glass to Adeline. "Arrived yesterday, according to the local fishermen we questioned." She studied the formidable structure. "Those walls must be 30 feet high, and I count at least 20 cannon positions." 24, Blackwood corrected, "plus whatever artillery they've added since my last intelligence." Solomon joined them, unrolling a detailed map of the fortress interior. The document had cost them dearly, obtained from a former guard now drinking himself to death in Tortuga. 3 main sections, the doctor explained: outer bailey with barracks and cannon placements, inner keep where Prescott conducts business, and below the holding pens for captives awaiting transport. "How many prisoners?" Adeline asked. "According to our source, capacity for 300. They're usually kept for only days before being loaded onto ships, bound for various markets." The magnitude of the operation struck Adeline anew. Hundreds of lives reduced to cargo, processed through this stone monstrosity with brutal efficiency. "And Prescott himself?" she asked. "Arrives quarterly to oversee operations," Blackwood replied. "Our intelligence suggests he's there now, finalizing a major shipment." As afternoon faded to evening, more of the crew gathered to study the fortress. With Jenkins imprisoned in the brig, Blackwood had promoted Rodriguez to temporary first mate, a controversial decision that recognized the man's unwilling role in the betrayal. "We'll never take it by direct assault," Rodriguez observed. "Even with a full crew, we'd be cut to pieces before reaching the walls." "We're not going to assault it," Blackwood replied. "We're going to infiltrate it." The plan that emerged was audacious to the point of madness. Using a fishing boat acquired from locals, a small team would approach the fortress posing as suppliers. Blackwood had memorized the guard rotations from their intelligence, identifying a window when a skeleton crew manned the walls. "Once inside, we split into 3 groups," he explained. "First team secures the main gate to prevent reinforcements from the barracks. Second team locates and frees the prisoners. Third team," his eyes met Adeline's, "finds Prescott." "And the Crimson Skull?" Solomon asked. "Graves will recognize our men. We wait until nightfall. His crew will be scattered throughout the port town, drinking and whoring." Blackwood's expression was grim. "And we avoid detection." As preparations continued, Adeline noticed a small boat approaching from the direction of the fortress. Alarmed, she alerted Blackwood. "Not from the fortress," he said after observing through his spyglass. "Look at the sailing style, that's Graves himself." The boat contained only 2 men, Graves and one of his officers. They approached cautiously, hands visible to show peaceful intent. "Resourceful as always, Elias," Graves called. As they came alongside, few would think to hide in plain sight of the fortress. Blackwood's pistol remained trained on his rival. "Give me one reason not to shoot you where you stand." "Because I've brought you this." Graves held up a rolled parchment, complete layout of the fortress, including the recent modifications, guard schedules, passwords, everything you need. "Why would you help us? You're working with Prescott." Graves' customary flamboyance had vanished, replaced by cold determination. Until I saw what's happening in there." His voice dropped. "There are children, Elias. Dozens of them, some no older than 5 or 6. Even from Graves, the revelation hit like a physical blow. Adeline felt her stomach turn. "You expect me to believe you've grown a conscience?" Blackwood demanded. "Believe what you want. I've done many things for profit, but this—" Graves shook his head. "Some lines shouldn't be crossed, not even by men like us." After Graves departed with a promise to create a diversion at the appointed time, opinions among the crew were divided. "It's a trap," Rodriguez insisted. "He betrayed us once already." "Perhaps," Blackwood acknowledged, "but the information checks out against our existing intelligence." "And if it is a trap?" Adeline asked privately. "Then we'll fight our way out, as we've always done." As sunset painted the sky in crimson and gold, she studied his profile, the strong jaw, the eyes that had seen too much suffering, the face that had become more dear to her than she could have imagined when he first found her in chains. "I recognized one of the guards on the wall," she admitted. "The man who held me down when they branded cargo numbers on the others. He took particular pleasure in his work." Blackwood's expression darkened. "Did he harm you?" "No, but I witnessed what he did to others." Her hand found his in the fading light. "If we encounter him tomorrow, he'll answer for it," Blackwood promised, his fingers tightening around hers. That night, as final preparations were made, Adeline found herself unable to sleep. Instead, she sat on deck beneath the stars, sewing additional hidden pockets into her clothing, places to conceal small weapons and tools that might prove useful inside the fortress. Solomon joined her, offering a steaming mug of tea. "For calm," he explained. "I'm not afraid," she said, surprised to find it true. "You should be. Fear keeps you sharp." The doctor settled beside her. "But there's a difference between fear that paralyzes and fear that prepares." They sat in companionable silence until Blackwood emerged from his cabin. Wordlessly, he extended his hand to Adeline. Solomon discreetly withdrew, leaving them alone. "If tomorrow goes wrong," Blackwood began. She pressed her fingers against his lips. Instead of words, they shared one perfect night beneath the Caribbean stars, a stolen moment of tenderness before the violence to come. No promises were made beyond the unspoken one in every touch, every kiss: to fight, to survive, to return to each other if fate allowed. As dawn approached, they reluctantly separated to make final preparations. The fortress loomed in the distance, its stone walls golden in the first light, beautiful and terrible, like the man who had sworn to bring them down. The stolen uniform chafed against Adeline's skin, a constant reminder of the danger they faced. Blackwood had initially resisted her inclusion in the infiltration team, but her knowledge of the slave ship procedures had proven decisive. "Remember," he murmured, as their small fishing boat approached the fortress harbor, "if we're challenged, let me speak. Keep your head down and play the role." 5 of them crouched in the boat: Blackwood, Adeline, Rodriguez, and 2 of the Tempest's most trusted fighters, all wearing uniforms taken from Prescott's guards during previous encounters. Solomon remained behind with the ship, preparing the surgery for the casualties they all knew would come. "Signal from the eastern tower," Rodriguez whispered. "That's Graves' man." A lantern flashed 3 times, the all-clear sign indicating their approach coincided with the changing of the guard, when attention would be diverted. "Boat approaching." The guard's call came right on schedule as they neared the harbor entrance. "State your business." "Relief rotation from the Marantha," Blackwood called back, his voice altered to a higher pitch than his natural bass. "Captain Fletcher sent us to replace the men he borrowed last week. Tense seconds passed as the guard consulted a ledger. Adeline kept her face turned away, heart pounding beneath the coarse uniform jacket. "You're not on the manifest," the guard finally replied. "Bloody Fletcher," Blackwood grumbled convincingly. "Man can't keep his records straight. We've been sailing 3 days to get here. You want to explain to Prescott why his borrowed men can't return to their ship." The implied threat of Prescott's displeasure worked. The guard waved them through with minimal scrutiny, a testament to the fortress's complacence. They had faced no serious threats in years, a fatal weakness Blackwood intended to exploit. They docked at a small pier rather than the main wharf where larger vessels anchored. 2 guards approached for inspection, but a commotion from the far side of the harbor, Graves's promised diversion, drew them away before they could look too closely at the new arrivals. "Move now," Blackwood ordered quietly. "Stay together until we reach the inner courtyard." They ascended stone steps, slick with sea spray, passing through the first gate with the password provided by Graves. Inside, the fortress buzzed with activity despite the late hour. Uniformed guards patrolled in pairs, while laborers moved supplies from warehouses to waiting ships. Adeline's stomach churned as they passed a group of chained men being escorted toward the harbor, new captives bound for markets across the Caribbean. She forced herself to look away, remembering her own time in such chains. "The holding pens are below the eastern tower," she whispered, recalling the fortress layout they had memorized. "If they follow standard procedure, new arrivals will be processed there first." Blackwood nodded. "Rodriguez, take Morris and secure the main gate as planned. We'll proceed to the pens." As Rodriguez and Morris peeled away, Adeline felt a chill of premonition. Something about the fortress felt wrong. The guards too relaxed, the security too lax. Either Graves's intelligence was flawed. "It's too easy," she murmured to Blackwood as they descended a narrow staircase toward the holding area. "They should have more men posted here." "I know." His hand brushed the pistol hidden beneath his coat. "Be ready." The staircase opened into a torch-lit corridor lined with heavy doors. The smell hit her first: unwashed bodies, human waste, fear. Memories flooded back. Her own captivity, the hopelessness, the degradation. Blackwood sensed her distress, his hand finding hers briefly. "Stay focused," he reminded her gently. A guard sat at a desk near the first cell, half asleep. Blackwood approached with confident strides. "Relief check. Prescott wants a full accounting before the shipment tomorrow." The guard straightened, instantly alert at Prescott's name. "Wasn't informed of any check." "That's the point of a surprise inspection." Blackwood's tone conveyed bored irritation. "Keys, please." "Won't take but a moment." The guard hesitated, then reached for the ring at his belt. In that instant of compliance, Adeline glimpsed movement at the end of the corridor, a flash of familiar peacock feathers. "Blackwood," she cried in warning. Everything happened at once. The guard's hand moved from keys to pistol. Blackwood struck first, a single blow rendering the man unconscious. From both ends of the corridor, armed men appeared. Graves' crew, not in support but in ambush. "I knew he couldn't be trusted," Blackwood growled, drawing his own weapons. The first wave came at them hard. Adeline found herself fighting back-to-back with Blackwood, her training transforming from practice to desperate reality. The dagger he'd given her claimed its first life, a bearded pirate who thought her the easier target. "The cells," Blackwood shouted between clashes of steel. "If we free the prisoners, we create chaos they can't control." They fought their way to the guard's desk, Blackwood snatching the keys as they passed. The first cell door swung open to reveal dozens of captives, eyes wide with fear and confusion. "We're here to free you," Adeline told them in multiple languages. "Help us fight and you gain your freedom." Some hesitated, broken by their captivity. Others surged forward, seizing the opportunity despite their chains. The corridor became a battlefield as more guards responded to the commotion. Through the chaos, Adeline caught sight of a face that haunted her nightmares, the guard who had taken such pleasure in tormenting captives aboard the Marantha. Their eyes met across the corridor, recognition dawning in his. The fat one, he shouted to his companions. She's the merchandise that escaped the Blackwood raid. Rage like she had never known surged through Adeline. This man had watched her humiliation, had participated in the breaking of countless others. Without conscious thought, she moved toward him, through the fighting, dagger ready. He saw her coming and laughed. "Come to me, little pig. I remember how you squealed when we branded the others. Should have marked you too." His mockery died as her blade found his shoulder, not a killing blow but enough to stagger him. He countered with his cutlass, a wild swing that would have decapitated her had she not ducked. "Adeline," Blackwood's voice cut through her focus. "Behind you." She turned just in time to see Jenkins, supposedly imprisoned on the Tempest, advancing with murderous intent, having somehow escaped and followed them to the fortress. "The captain's pet," he sneered. "He'll watch you die before I kill him." Two enemies, two threats. Adeline steadied herself, remembering Blackwood's lessons: leverage, opportunity, precision. The battle raged around them, but in that moment, her world narrowed to these two men who represented everything she had fought to overcome. Time slowed as Adeline assessed her impossible situation, the guard from the Marantha before her, Jenkins behind, and chaos erupting throughout the corridor, as freed captives clashed with their former tormentors. Adeline down. Blackwood's command cut through the den. She dropped instinctively as a pistol shot cracked overhead. Jenkins staggered, clutching his shoulder, but remained standing. The Marantha guard used her distraction to lunge, his blade slicing through her sleeve and drawing blood. Pain lanced through her arm, but Adeline had endured worse. She pivoted, using her substantial weight as Blackwood had taught her, and drove her shoulder into the guard's midsection. He stumbled backward into the wall. Before she could press her advantage, rough hands seized her from behind. Not Jenkins, he still struggled with his wound, but two of Graves' men, materializing from the melee. "Captain wants this one alive," one shouted, twisting her arm until she dropped her dagger. Across the corridor, Blackwood fought like a man possessed, cutting down three opponents in quick succession as he tried to reach her. "Adeline." Their eyes met briefly before something hard struck the back of her head. The world tilted, darkness encroaching at the edges of her vision. Her last sight was Blackwood disappearing beneath a surge of enemies. She woke to cold water splashed across her face. Disoriented, Adeline blinked in dim torchlight, gradually recognizing her surroundings. A stone cell, different from the holding pens, but unmistakably part of the fortress. Her hands were bound behind her, shoulders aching from the awkward position. "Welcome back to captivity," a cultured voice greeted her. "Though under rather different circumstances than your last experience." The speaker stepped into the light, a tall, elegantly dressed man, with silver at his temples, and cold eyes that assessed her like a commodity. She had never seen his face, but she knew immediately who he was. Prescott. Indeed. He circled her appraisingly. "You've caused me considerable trouble, Miss Lambert. First escaping the Marantha, then allying with Blackwood, and now this ill-fated assault on my operation." She tested her restraints rope, not chains tied by someone who knew their craft. "Where is Captain Blackwood?" "Alive, for now." "Greaves thought you might be useful leverage." The name confirmed what they had already suspected. "Graves betrayed us. Betrayed implies he was ever on your side." Prescott chuckled. "Marcus has been my business partner for years. Your captain's vendetta against slavers made him predictable and exploitable. Memories of the storm, the sabotage, Jenkins's escape, all fell into place. Graves had orchestrated everything, using their crusade against them." "The prisoners we freed?" she asked, dreading the answer. "Being recaptured as we speak. Those who resisted have been dealt with." Prescott straightened his immaculate cuffs. "Business will continue with minimal disruption." Nausea rose in her throat, but Adeline forced it down, showing weakness would only satisfy him. "You won't succeed. Others know about this place, about your operation. Others without Blackwood's obsessive drive. Without his resources, I think not. Prescott moved to the cell door. Rest while you can. Soon you'll face the man who actually purchased you months ago, before Blackwood's inconvenient interference. After he departed, Adeline took stock of her situation. The cell was solid stone, the door heavy oak with iron reinforcement. Her hidden lockpick sewn into her dress by the Tempest seamstress pressed against her hip, but she couldn't reach it with her hands bound. Hours passed. Guards changed outside her door, speaking in low voices. From these fragments, she pieced together the fortress's status. Fighting continued in some sections, with Rodriguez and others still at large. Blackwood was being held separately, interrogated by Graves himself. When night fell, a new guard brought stale bread and water. He was younger than the others, nervous and clumsy as he set the tray down. "Please," Adeline whispered. "My hands. I can't eat like this." He hesitated, then glanced down the corridor. "Be quick about it," he muttered, untying her wrist. The moment her hands were free, Adeline struck, not at the guard, but at the tray, sending it clattering against the far wall. The distraction gave her precious seconds to retrieve the lockpick hidden in her clothing. "Quiet," he hissed, rebinding her hands more loosely than before. When he left, Adeline worked her bonds against the rough stone wall, gradually loosening them, while keeping the lockpick concealed in her palm. By midnight, she had freed her hands and begun examining the door lock. It was old, but well-maintained, its mechanism simple enough for her limited skills. The seamstress had taught her the basics during quiet evenings aboard the Tempest. "Every woman should know how to escape," she'd said with a wink. The lock yielded with a soft click. Adeline pressed her ear to the door, listening for guards. Two voices conversed nearby, one complaining about missing the entertainment in the great hall where Prescott was hosting his buyers. She waited until their voices receded before easing the door open. The corridor was dimly lit, cells lining both sides. Most stood empty, their occupants presumably moved to the main holding pens or killed in the fighting. Moving silently despite her size, another skill honed aboard the Tempest. Adeline navigated the dungeon complex. At each intersection she paused to orient herself according to the fortress layout she had memorized. A scream echoed from somewhere above, a woman's voice, raw with pain. Adeline froze, torn between continuing her search for Blackwood and investigating the cry. Before she could decide, heavy footsteps approached from around the corner. She pressed herself into a shadowed alcove as the Marantha guard passed. Blood spattered across his uniform. His keys jangled at his belt, keys that might open any cell in the fortress. Decision made in an instant, Adeline emerged from hiding and struck from behind, aiming for the vulnerable spot at the base of his skull that Blackwood had taught her. The guard crumpled with a muffled grunt. Dragging his unconscious form back into the alcove, she appropriated his keys, pistol and knife. The uniform she left, it would never fit, and attempting to disguise herself would only draw attention to her distinctive appearance. Armed and determined, Adeline continued her search. Somewhere in this stone labyrinth, Blackwood awaited either rescue or execution. Beyond these walls, the Tempest's crew fought against overwhelming odds, and somewhere above, Edmund Prescott continued the business of buying and selling humans, including perhaps her own. The fortress dungeons formed a bewildering maze beneath the main structure. Adeline navigated by instinct and fragments of remembered maps, the stolen keys granting access to areas that would otherwise have remained sealed. Each door might lead to Blackwood, or to discovery and recapture. Voices approached. She ducked into an alcove, pressing herself against cold stone as two guards passed. "Never seen Graves so determined," one was saying. "Been at Blackwood for hours. Waste of time," his companion replied. "The man won't break. Everyone breaks eventually. Question is whether he'll still be breathing when Prescott's finished parading him before the buyers." Their conversation faded as they rounded a corner, but the information remained. Blackwood lived and was being held somewhere. Graves could interrogate him privately. 3 levels up, Adeline found what she sought, a heavily guarded door at the end of a torchlit corridor. Two men stood watch, alert and well-armed. A direct approach would be suicide. Retreating to reconsider, she explored adjacent passages until she discovered a narrow maintenance shaft used to deliver food and remove waste from the cells. It was barely wide enough for her shoulders, but necessity overcame discomfort. She squeezed into the cramped space, inching upward in darkness until she reached a small grate that opened into the guarded room. Through the metal lattice, she could see Blackwood. The sight made her blood run cold. He hung suspended from the ceiling by iron manacles, his body a canvas of methodical abuse. Blood matted his hair and stained his tattered shirt. Yet his face, though bruised, remained defiant. Graves paced before him, peacock feather absurdly bright in his hat. "This can end, Elias. Just tell me where the Tempest's treasure is hidden." Blackwood spat blood onto the stone floor. "There is no treasure. 7 years of successful raids. The Spanish gold from the galleon alone would buy a plantation." Graves gestured to a brazier where metal implements heated to glowing orange. "I know you, Elias. Always planning, always careful. You've hidden it somewhere." "You know nothing about me." Graves selected a branding iron from the brazier, the same type used to mark slaves as property. The branded symbol became visible as it turned it a stylized P for Prescott. "Perhaps you need motivation beyond your own suffering," Graves suggested. "The woman, for instance. Adeline, isn't it?" Prescott's buyer was most specific about how he intends to use her. "But I could intervene, ensure she's sold to someone less creative in his appetites." Blackwood lunged against his restraints, muscles straining against unyielding metal. "Touch her, and You'll what?" Graves laughed. "You're finished, Elias. Your crew captured or dead. Your ship seized. All that remains is to decide how painfully you'll leave this world." He replaced the brand in the fire. "I'll give you 1 hour to reconsider. Then we'll see if the threat to your woman loosens your tongue." After Graves departed, leaving a single guard, Adeline worked frantically to loosen the grate. The rusted metal finally gave way, allowing her to squeeze through into a shadowed corner of the cell. The guard stood with his back to her, attention fixed on his prisoner. One careful step at a time, she crept forward until she was close enough to strike. The knife made little sound as it slid between his ribs and into his heart. "Elias," she whispered, rushing to Blackwood as the guard crumpled. His eyes, clouded with pain, cleared at the sight of her. "Adeline, how quiet," she urged, examining his shackles. The mechanism was complex, but the stolen keys eventually yielded the correct one. As the manacles released, Blackwood collapsed into her arms, his considerable weight nearly taking them both to the floor. "You shouldn't be here," he rasped, struggling to stand on his own. "The fortress is lost. You should have escaped while you could." "I go nowhere without you," she replied simply, supporting him as he found his balance. "Can you walk?" "I can fight," he corrected, retrieving the dead guard's weapons. Despite his injuries, determination hardened his features into something almost frightening. "Prescott is here. Tonight ends his operation one way or another." They slipped from the cell, Adeline leading them through the passages she had mapped during her search. Twice they were forced to hide from patrols. Once they had no choice but to fight. A brief, brutal encounter that left 2 more guards dead and Blackwood bleeding afresh from reopened wounds. "The main hall," he insisted, as they reached a junction. "Prescott will be there, displaying his merchandise to buyers. You're in no condition. I've waited 7 years for this moment." His eyes burned with intensity that brooked no argument. "My sister died because of men like Prescott. How many more will suffer if we leave now?" Understanding the futility of debate, Adeline nodded. "Then we do it together." They found their way to a gallery overlooking the fortress's great hall, a vantage point that revealed the full horror of Prescott's operation. Below, finely dressed gentlemen circulated among captives displayed on small platforms. Women, men, Even children stood in various states of undress, examined like livestock by potential buyers. At the center of it all stood Prescott himself, elegant and detached as he directed the proceedings. Beside him, Graves preened in his gaudy attire, playing the role of jovial host. "There," Blackwood whispered, indicating a side entrance where armed men escorted a new group of captives into the hall, prisoners from the Tempest, their expressions a mixture of fear and defiance. "They've captured more of my crew. We can't save everyone," Adeline reminded him gently. "Not like this, just the two of us." Blackwood's gaze never left Prescott. "We can save the next shipment, and the next, if we stop this tonight, permanently." From his belt he produced a small object that Adeline recognized with shock. A grenade, one of the experimental weapons they had captured from a Spanish vessel months earlier. "No," she gasped, understanding his intention. "There must be another way. There is." His expression softened as he looked at her. "This was always my endgame, Adeline, to destroy Prescott's operation completely, at the cost of your life, of the captives below, of your own crew." His hesitation revealed the conflict within him. Vengeance versus the lives that would be lost in its achievement. For the first time since she had known him, uncertainty clouded his features. In that moment of indecision, the gallery door burst open behind them. Jenkins stood framed in the doorway, bloodied but triumphant, pistol raised. "Found you at last," he snarled. "Time to finish what should have ended at sea." Time condensed to a single moment. Jenkins' finger tightening on the trigger, Blackwood lunging sideways, Adeline's cry of warning piercing the air. The pistol discharged with a deafening crack, the ball grazing Blackwood's shoulder instead of finding his heart. Below, heads turned toward the gallery. Prescott's voice rose above the sudden commotion. "Guards, intruders in the upper level." Blackwood recovered his balance and hurled himself at Jenkins. The two men crashed to the floor, locked in a desperate struggle. Despite his injuries, Blackwood matched his former first mate's strength, fueled by righteous fury. Adeline scrambled for the fallen grenade, securing it before it could roll into the hall below. As she rose, she found herself facing the Marantha guard, the same man who had tormented captives, who had mocked her size and spirit, who now blocked the only exit from the gallery. "Remember me, pig?" he sneered, drawing his blade. "Every day," she answered, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. In her hand, she still clutched the grenade. His eyes widened as he recognized the weapon. "You wouldn't, you'd die too." Adeline smiled grimly. "Perhaps, but you'd go first." Uncertainty flickered across his face, just enough hesitation for her to act. She feinted with the grenade, then drove her knife upward as he flinched. The blade found his throat with precision, born of Blackwood's patient training. Warm blood sprayed across her hand as the guard collapsed. Behind her, Blackwood and Jenkins continued their brutal contest. Neither man fought with finesse now, just raw desperation, each knowing only one would walk away. Jenkins' superior condition began to tell against Blackwood's injuries. He pinned the captain against the gallery railing, hands closing around his throat. "Should have killed you when I had the chance," Jenkins growled. Adeline moved without conscious thought, crossing the distance in 3 strides and driving her shoulder into Jenkins' side with all her considerable weight behind it. The impact sent him staggering sideways, breaking his grip on Blackwood. Before Jenkins could recover, Blackwood seized him by the shirt and belt. With a roar that contained 7 years of righteous vengeance, he heaved upward, lifting Jenkins over the gallery railing. Time seemed to slow as Jenkins fell, his scream cutting short as he crashed onto one of the auction platforms below. The assembled buyers scattered in panic. Prescott's voice rose above the chaos, ordering his guards to restore order. "We need to move," Adeline urged, supporting Blackwood as his strength wavered. "The whole fortress will be after us now." He nodded grimly, retrieving the grenade from her hand. "The powder magazine," It's our only chance to end this permanently. Armed men pounded up the stairs toward the gallery. Blackwood and Adeline fled in the opposite direction, navigating the Roches's upper levels with desperate speed. Twice they encountered guards. Twice Blackwood fought with the ferocity of a cornered wolf, clearing their path despite wounds that would have felled a lesser man. They found the powder magazine behind a heavy iron door, its lock yielding to a key from the ring Adeline had stolen. Inside, barrels of gunpowder stood in neat rows, enough explosive force to reduce half the fortress to rubble. "This will destroy the entire operation," Blackwood said, voice hoarse from exertion. "But we need to warn our people, get them clear before—" A pistol shot echoed in the confined space. Blackwood staggered, crimson blooming across his shirt. Behind him stood Graves, peacock feather askew in his damaged hat, smoking pistol in hand. "So predictable, Elias," he taunted. "Always the noble sacrifice." Blackwood collapsed to his knees, one hand pressed to the wound in his side. Adeline moved to him instinctively, but his eyes warned her to stay back. 7 years hunting slavers," Graves continued, drawing a second pistol, "all leading to this moment. I must admit, I expected more." "Why?" Blackwood asked, voice strained with pain. "We were brothers once. What turned you into this? Money, power, the realization that men like Prescott always win in the end." Graves gestured around them. "This operation generates more wealth in a month than we saw in a year of traditional piracy. I simply chose the winning side." While he spoke, Adeline edged sideways, positioning herself between the barrels. Her hand closed around a loose gunpowder horn. "And Elizabeth?" Blackwood pressed. "Did you know what her father planned when you betrayed us?" Something flickered in Graves' expression. Regret, perhaps, or the ghost of a conscience long buried. "That was unfortunate, but necessary." "As is this," Adeline said, throwing the powder horn directly at Graves' face. Black powder billowed in a choking cloud. Graves fired blindly, the ball splintering a barrel near Adeline's head. In the confusion, Blackwood surged forward with his last strength, tackling Graves to the ground. "Go," he shouted to Adeline. "Find the others. Get them out." "Not without you," she insisted, helping him subdue the struggling Graves. Together, they bound the rogue captain with his own belt and gagged him with a strip of cloth. The grenade would serve its purpose, with or without him, as an unwilling witness. Staggering under Blackwood's increasing weight, Adeline guided them through the fortress. The alarm had spread. Guards abandoned their posts to investigate the commotion, leaving paths clear that would normally be heavily defended. They found Rodriguez and the surviving crew members in the lower levels, having fought their way to the main holding cells. Dozens of captives had already been freed, the massive ring of fortress keys now in Rodriguez's possession. "Captain," exclaimed, rushing to support Blackwood's other side. "We thought you lost." "No time," Blackwood gasped, blood seeping between his fingers, powder magazine set to blow. "Get everyone out, now." Understanding dawned on Rodriguez's face. "How long?" 10 minutes. No more. What followed was organized chaos. Crew members leading groups of freed captives toward the harbor, while others created diversions to draw away Prescott's forces. Adeline remained at Blackwood's side, refusing to leave even as his strength ebbed visibly with each passing minute. In the confusion, they glimpsed Prescott fleeing toward his private vessel, surrounded by guards and carrying chests of documents and valuables. Blackwood's hand tightened on his pistol, but Adeline gently pressed it down. "He won't escape," she promised. "The harbor will be destroyed with everything else." As they reached the outer walls, Blackwood faltered, knees buckling beneath him. Blood soaked his clothing, his face ashen in the torchlight. "Leave me," he whispered. "I'll only slow you down." Adeline's response was to lift him bodily, her substantial strength equal to his weight. "I did not come this far to lose you now." Behind them, the fortress that had destroyed so many lives prepared to meet its own destruction. Before them lay freedom, justice, and perhaps, if fate was kind, a future together. The explosion lit the night sky like a new dawn, stone and timber raining into the harbor as Porto da Cadenas collapsed upon itself. From the deck of the Tempest, now safely beyond the blast radius, Adeline watched the fortress burn. The symbol of her captivity, the nexus of suffering for countless others, reduced to flame and rubble. "It's done," Solomon said quietly, joining her at the rail. 7 years of hunting, finally complete. Adeline's thoughts were not on the destruction, but on the man fighting for his life below deck. 3 days had passed since their escape from the fortress, 3 days of Blackwood suspended between life and death. Solomon working tirelessly to extract the ball from his side and combat the fever that followed. "How is he?" she asked, though she had posed the same question hourly since their return. "Still with us." Solomon's tired eyes held cautious optimism. "The fever broke an hour ago. If infection doesn't set in, he has a chance." A chance. It was more than many had received at Porto de Cadenas. More than Jenkins crushed beneath falling stone. More than Graves last seen bound in the powder magazine as the fuse burned down. More than Prescott, whose ship had been caught in the harbor when the explosion collapsed the stone breakwater upon it. Of the nearly 200 captives freed from the fortress, 68 had survived to be taken aboard. The Tempest and 2 merchant vessels they had commandeered in the aftermath. The rest had been lost in the chaos, or gone their separate ways, tasting freedom for the first time in months or years. Rodriguez approached, now officially the first mate following a unanimous vote by the surviving crew. "We've mapped a course to return the captives to their homes, starting with the Ivory Coast, then circling to Hispaniola for those taken from there." "How long?" Adeline asked. 3 months, perhaps 4. He hesitated. "Some have asked to join our crew instead. They want to help free others." She nodded, unsurprised. The bonds forged in shared suffering created powerful allegiances. The captain would welcome them if... She couldn't finish the thought. "When he recovers," Rodriguez said firmly. "Not if." That night, as the Tempest sailed eastward under star-filled skies, Adeline kept vigil beside Blackwood's bunk. His breathing seemed steadier than before, his skin cooler to the touch. In sleep, the hard lines of his face softened, revealing the man he might have been had fate dealt him a gentler hand. "You should rest," Solomon advised, when he came to check the bandages. "You've barely slept since we left the fortress." "I'll rest when he wakes," she replied. The doctor sighed but didn't argue. Instead, he showed her how to change the dressings and mix the medicinal teas that help fight infection. "Call me if his fever returns," he instructed before leaving them alone. In the quiet darkness, Adeline held Blackwood's hand and spoke softly of everything and nothing. Her childhood before captivity, her dreams of seeing distant shores, her gratitude for the day he had found her in chains and declared she belonged elsewhere. Just before dawn, his fingers tightened around hers, his eyes opened, clouded with pain but aware. "Adeline," he whispered, voice rough from disuse. Joy surged through her. "I'm here. The fortress? Destroyed. Completely. Prescott? Dead. Along with Graves and Jenkins." A long exhale escaped him. 7 years of purpose finally fulfilled. "The crew? 17 lost. 32 remain, with potentially more joining from among those we freed." His eyes held hers, searching. "And you? Are you well?" The simple question encompassed so much: her physical health, her emotional state after facing her former captors, her place now that their shared mission was complete. "I am free," she answered, the words carrying all she couldn't express. His hand reached up to touch her face, fingers tracing the curve of her cheek with wonder. "What happens now?" 2 weeks later, when Blackwood could finally stand unaided, they gathered the crew on deck. The Tempest had delivered the first group of freed captives to their homeland, celebrating their return with supplies and gold enough to rebuild their lives. "Our mission has changed," Blackwood announced, his powerful voice carrying despite his lingering weakness. "No longer do we hunt only slave ships, any vessel carrying captives against their will, indentured servants, impressed sailors, political prisoners will find in us their liberation." The crew roared their approval, cutlasses and pistols raised to the sky. Among them stood former captives who had chosen to remain, now wearing the clothes of sailors rather than prisoners. Later, as sunset painted the horizon in shades of amber and gold, Blackwood found Adeline at the bow. She wore the blue dress from Tortuga, her hair loose in the ocean breeze. Around her neck hung her mother's silver medallion, now joined by a second pendant, a small iron key salvaged from the fortress, symbol of all they had unlocked together. "The men have been talking," he said, standing beside her. "They think the ship needs a new name to mark our new purpose. And what do you think?" "I think—" He took her hand, his touch more eloquent than words. "I think many things need new names, new beginnings." From his pocket, he withdrew a battered captain's hat, not his own, but smaller sized for a different head. "The crew elected you second captain. They say anyone who carried me bodily from a burning fortress has earned the right to command." Adeline took the hat, emotion tightening her throat. "I know nothing of captaining a ship. You know everything about freedom, about resilience." His eyes, clear and certain, held hers. "The rest can be learned." As she placed the hat upon her head, cheers erupted from the watching crew. Rodriguez grinned from the helm, while Solomon raised a flask in salute. Blackwood's arm slipped around her waist, solid and secure. "Where shall we sail, Captain Lambert?" Adeline gazed at the endless horizon, feeling the ship's motion beneath her feet and the strength of the man beside her. Once she had been merchandise, valued only for the profit her sail would bring. Now she stood on her own quarterdeck, charting her own course. "Wherever there are chains to break," she answered. "Wherever people wait to be free." The Tempest, soon to be renamed, sailed into the setting sun, leaving behind the shadows of the past and carrying forward a legacy of liberation. At its helm stood two captains, once broken by the world's cruelty, now made stronger in their mended places. And in the wake of their passing, the whispers spread from port to port. "Beware the pirate ship with twin captains, for they seek not gold, but justice, not plunder, but redemption, not conquest, but freedom, for all who have known the weight of chains."